Rain hammered down on the roof of Lucy Morgan's car as she wound her way through the dark backroads of Pine Creek. The rhythmic thud of the windshield wipers battled the torrent of water, but still her vision was obscured by streaks and droplets blurring the glass. Her eyes strained to follow the curve of the road ahead, headlights slicing through the downpour in narrow cones of visibility. She was exhausted. 12 hours at the hospital, running non-stop from one emergency to the next, had drained every ounce of her energy. Her scrubs were damp from sweat and now clinging cold to her skin. Her only thought was of home, curling into her couch with a glass of wine, a blanket, and silence. Then something moved. A blur of shape and shadow flickered in the road ahead, too large to be a fallen branch, too steady to be wind. Lucy's foot slammed on the brakes and the tires skidded on the wet pavement, sending a jolt of adrenaline through her spine. The car lurched and came to a screeching halt just feet from what looked like a stroller. Her heart pounded against her ribs as she stared at the impossible scene. There, in the center of the slick road, sat a baby stroller. Alone. It rocked slightly in the wind, its wheels creaking faintly as the gusts pushed against its frame. Lucy's hands clenched the steering wheel as her breath caught in her throat. "What on earth?" She whispered aloud. But it wasn't just the stroller that sent a cold shiver down her spine. Her eyes locked onto a figure just beyond it. A German shepherd. The dog circled the stroller with a tense, deliberate gait, hackles raised, teeth bared whenever the wind shifted the stroller even an inch. Its eyes glinted in the low light of her headlights, and its entire body radiated a kind of alert, protective energy. Lucy's fingers trembled as she reached for her phone, unable to tear her eyes away. The dog wasn't just being territorial, it wasn't rabid or angry, it was guarding, watching, protecting. And its eyes, those eyes were too sharp, too intelligent, too human. Her finger found the emergency call button. 911, what's your emergency? "There's a stroller," Lucy said, her voice barely steady, "in the middle of Pinewood Drive near the Hollow Creek Forest entrance. And there's a German shepherd. It's guarding it. I don't see a baby, but the dog, he won't let anyone get near." "Ma'am, have you checked if there's a baby in the stroller?" Lucy swallowed hard. Her breath fogged the inside of the car window. "No, I can't get close. The dog's, it's not attacking, but it's definitely warning me, and something's wrong. I can feel it." "Please stay in your vehicle. We're dispatching a unit now." Lucy nodded, as if the dispatcher could see her, and hung up. The phone slipped in her grip for a moment before she clutched it tighter. Outside, the rain continued to pour. The dog's fur was soaked, heavy with water, yet it remained steadfast, circling the stroller like a sentinel. She squinted, examining the stroller again. It was high-end, with plush padding and a partially blown-off rain cover. No visible signs of a baby, but no sign of damage either. The dog's coat, while muddy, was well kept, groomed, not a stray, not wild. "Where's your family?" Lucy asked aloud, her voice barely more than a breath. As if hearing her, the dog stopped, its ears perked up. Then, without warning, it let out a series of sharp, urgent barks, not directed at her, but at the forest. It stood still, barking at the dark tree line like it was calling out. Lucy sat frozen, her eyes flicking between the forest and the dog. Something about the bark, its tone, its rhythm, sounded almost like a plea. The wind picked up again, rustling the trees, and the stroller creaked where it sat unmoving in the center of the road. Every instinct told her to stay in the car. But her body leaned forward, hand reaching for the door handle, driven by a force she couldn't name. Just then, red and blue lights flickered in her rearview mirror. A wave of relief surged through her as 2 police cruisers pulled in behind her, tires splashing through puddles. 2 officers emerged quickly, yellow ponchos flaring out as they stepped into the storm. The dog's barking intensified. Still not aggressive, but urgent, emotional. It barked toward the woods, then dashed a few steps in that direction before running back to the stroller. Back and forth. Back and forth. "Stay in your vehicle, ma'am," one officer called as Lucy cracked her window. "Animal control is on the way," the other officer added, glancing at the dog. "There might be a baby," Lucy shouted back, her voice rising over the wind. "Please, we're wasting time!" The officer closest to the stroller approached cautiously, palms open in a non-threatening gesture. "Easy, boy," he murmured. The German shepherd growled but didn't lunge. Its body trembled, not with rage, but with something more desperate. As the officer got within 10 feet, everything shifted. The dog suddenly whirled around and sprinted toward the forest edge, barking furiously, then stopped, turning back toward them before darting again toward the trees. It wasn't trying to attack, it was trying to show them something. "I think he wants us to follow him," Lucy said, stepping out of her car. "Ma'am, please get back." But they were cut off. A sound rose above the barking, faint at first, almost drowned out by the rain, then clearer. "Max, I'm here." 3 pairs of eyes snapped toward the forest edge. A small figure stumbled out from the trees, a boy no older than 5, soaked to the bone. Mud clung to his pajama bottoms, his bare feet scratched and bleeding, his blonde hair plastered to his forehead, his eyes wide. The dog, Max, apparently raced toward him. The boy dropped to his knees and threw his arms around the dog's neck, pressing his face into the wet fur. "He helped me," the boy whispered, just loud enough for Lucy to hear over the rain. "Max helped me find my way back." Lucy stared, heart aching, mind racing. Who was this boy? Where had he come from? And how had a dog? Before she could finish the thought, the boy looked up, and the truth began to unfurl like a storm waiting to break. 3 miles away, chaos had already erupted inside the cheerful red brick building of Sunnyside Preschool and Daycare. The soft pastels and cartoon murals lining the walls now served as a strange backdrop to frantic movement. Teachers darted from room to room, opening closets, checking under tables, even searching the storage cubbies with wild eyes. "Check the bathrooms again," someone yelled. Sarah Jensen, the lead teacher for the Cardinals room, stood frozen for a moment in the hallway, her face pale and streaked with tears. She clutched the attendant's clipboard to her chest like a life preserver, knuckles white. I just looked away for a second," she whispered to Detective Reynolds, who had arrived moments earlier, his presence already commanding order amidst the panic. 1 minute he was colouring in the reading corner. I turned to help Maddie with her shoelaces, and when I looked back, Noah was gone. Reynolds' voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp, scanning every detail. "How long exactly?" 45 seconds, maybe less. "And the doors?" "All locked," Sarah said immediately, her voice rising with urgency. "We have electronic locks on every exterior door. Parents need a code. Children can't even reach the exit buttons without help." The daycare director, Miss Winters, joined them, her usual firm demeanour cracking under the weight of the moment. "We're checking security footage, but our system's been glitching this week. The company was scheduled to fix it tomorrow." Reynolds' expression darkened. "What about the parents?" "On their way," Miss Winters confirmed. "They both work across town. The mother is an architect, the father's in IT." As if summoned by the mention, the front doors burst open. A woman with dark curly hair rushed in, her face pale and panicked. She was followed closely by a tall man whose own features had gone stark white. "Where is he?" the woman cried, her voice echoing through the room. "Where's my baby?" Detective Reynolds stepped forward. "Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, I'm Detective Reynolds. We're doing everything we can to find Noah." Rachel Hayes gripped her husband's arm so tightly her knuckles blanched. How does a 4-year-old just disappear from a locked facility? "He's 5, David Hayes corrected, barely audible. "He turned 5 last month." Reynolds nodded, making a note. "Blonde hair, blue eyes, approximately 3 feet 7 inches tall. Dinosaur pajamas. For nap time," Rachel confirmed through trembling lips. "He has a small birthmark on his right wrist, shaped like a heart." "We'll find him," Reynolds assured her, though the worry in his voice betrayed the uncertainty behind his professional calm. "It's going to storm again," Rachel said, glancing at the windows. Her voice broke. "The weather alert said severe rain, lightning. Please, you have to find him." "Mrs. Hayes," Reynolds asked gently, "has anyone unusual shown interest in Noah lately? Anyone who might have had the door code?" David's eyes snapped up. "Are you suggesting someone took him?" Before Reynolds could answer, his radio crackled. He stepped away to answer, his brows tightening as he listened. When he returned, his tone had changed. "We found a boy matching Noah's description about 3 miles from here," he said, "near the entrance to Hollow Creek Forest." Rachel gasped, her knees threatening to buckle. "That's impossible. He wouldn't even know how to get there. He's just a kid." There was a German shepherd with him, Reynolds added, guarding a baby stroller in the middle of the road. A stroller? David echoed. We haven't had one in years, Rachel said. Noah hasn't needed a stroller since he was 3. We should go, Reynolds said. Now. The ride through the storm-washed streets was tense and silent. Thunder cracked overhead, lightning slicing across the sky in violent arcs. Rachel sat in the back seat, one hand over her mouth, the other clutching David's sleeve. Noah's always been different, David said quietly, his voice barely rising above the sound of rain against the windshield. Rachel shot him a warning look, but Reynolds caught it in the mirror. Different how? David hesitated. This morning, before daycare. He said he heard someone calling him. Rachel closed her eyes but didn't interrupt. He said it came from under the trees, David continued. Said it was important. You thought he was playing pretend? Reynolds asked. We didn't know what to think, Rachel murmured. Reynolds's hands tightened on the steering wheel. What exactly did he say? David's voice was soft. He said, Someone small needs help, Daddy. They can't find their way home. They've been lost for a very, very long time. Silence fell. The rain softened briefly to a mist, as if the storm itself were holding its breath. Rachel turned toward the window, her voice almost inaudible. What if he wasn't pretending? By the time they reached the scene, the police had already cordoned off the area. Noah sat wrapped in a blanket inside the back seat of a cruiser, looking remarkably calm for a child who'd just emerged from a storm-soaked forest. Max, the German shepherd, sat alert beside the door, refusing to move. Animal control had arrived, but the dog wouldn't let anyone near the car. He didn't growl, didn't lunge. He simply watched, waiting. Rachel was out of the detective's car before it had stopped fully. Noah, she cried, running through the drizzle. The boy looked up, his blue eyes impossibly serene. Hi, Mummy, he said, as if he'd just returned from school. She dropped to her knees and pulled him into her arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Baby, what happened? How did you get all the way out here? She ran her hands over his arms, his face, his feet, scratched but intact. He didn't answer her question. Instead, he looked past her to Max. That's my friend, Noah said. He needed my help. David knelt beside them. Noah, whose dog is this? Where did you find the stroller? The boy's reply was simple. Max doesn't belong to people anymore. He belongs to the forest. And the stroller, it belongs to the baby who got lost. Detective Reynolds stepped closer, notepad in hand. Noah, can you tell us how you got out of your daycare? Noah tilted his head, considering. The back door was open a little bit. Max was waiting for me by the playground fence. Sarah Jensen had arrived by then and gasped. That's impossible. The back door has an alarm. Not if the power went out for a second, Officer Parker interjected. We've had outages all over town. Reynolds turned back to Noah. How did you know his name was Max? Noah looked up at him. He told me, in my head, like how he told me about the baby. Rachel pulled her son close again. Dogs don't talk, baby. Max can, Noah insisted. Not with words, with pictures, with feelings. He showed me. And just like that, everyone standing in the storm began to realize this wasn't over. It was just beginning. Detective Reynolds crouched beside the boy, rain dripping from the brim of his hat as he tried to process what he was hearing. Noah, still wrapped in the police blanket, sat calmly in the cruiser, Max's head resting protectively on his knee. The storm had eased, but thunder still echoed faintly through the trees like distant drums warning of something not yet resolved. Noah, the detective said carefully, when you say Max told you about the baby, what exactly did he show you? Noah tilted his head slightly, as though listening to a voice only he could hear. He showed me pictures, the boy said finally. A long time ago, there was a baby in that stroller. But then, the baby was gone. Max tried to find her. He looked and looked, but no one believed him. People thought he was a bad dog, so they chased him away. Lucy Morgan, who had remained nearby despite being told she could leave, stepped forward now, her nurse's instincts still active. Something about the way Noah spoke, the steadiness of his voice, the clarity, struck her as unusual for a 5-year-old. He wasn't crying. He wasn't frightened. He was certain. Noah, she said gently, crouching to his level, I'm Lucy. I'm a nurse. Can you tell me where Max took you today? The boy studied her face for a long moment. Then, after apparently deciding she was safe, he answered, "To the high place, where the ground falls away, where the baby was last." Reynolds glanced toward the forest. "You mean the cliffs? By Hollow Creek?" Noah nodded. "Where the trees make a circle, where the vines grow like ropes." David's face paled. "That's dangerous terrain. There've been landslides there. Noah, how did you even know how to get there?" "Max showed me the way," Noah replied simply, "and when the ground got slippery, he held my pajamas in his teeth." "Detective," Officer Parker called from a few yards away, "we found something." The group followed Parker through the edge of the forest toward a narrow trail that led deeper into the trees. Muddy paw prints and small, barefoot impressions dotted the path. The trail grew steeper, and eventually they emerged onto a small plateau overlooking a drop so sheer it took Rachel's breath away. The overlook, known by locals as Hollow Point, was silent now, save for the soft tapping of rain from the trees. "This is where he brought me," Noah said, stepping forward with Max close beside him. "This is where she was." Reynolds scanned the clearing. The ground was uneven, with a distinct shallow depression near the center, ringed by a cluster of towering pine trees. It had a strange, almost sacred stillness to it. "What do you mean, where she was, Noah?" he asked. Noah pointed to the center of the shallow dip in the earth. "There. That's where the ground ate the baby," Rachel gasped. "What?" "The ground was soft," Noah explained. "Like yesterday. The bad man was holding the baby and Max bit him. The man dropped her and she rolled down into the hole. It was deeper back then, full of water and mud." Reynolds's brows furrowed. "You're saying she fell into a sinkhole?" "That's exactly what it sounds like," David whispered. "This whole area is limestone. Sinkholes are common here after heavy rain." Officer Parker was already crouched at the depression, inspecting the ground. "The soil here is different," he called. "Looser, and what's this?" He held up something twisted and dark, a length of thick vine nearly 2 feet long, its edge frayed. "It's been cut," he said. "With a knife?" Noah nodded gravely. "The bad man tried to use it to pull the baby out, but he couldn't reach her. The man took the stroller and ran." Dr. Fiona Barnes, the child psychologist who had joined them earlier, watched Noah with quiet intensity. "Noah," she said gently, "how do you know all of this? You weren't there when it happened." "Max showed me," he replied, "in pictures and smells and feelings." He turned to Reynolds. "We need to dig. She's still there." Silence fell. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. The only sound was the slow dripping of rain from the pine needles overhead. Reynolds turned to Parker. "Call in forensics, search and rescue. We'll need excavation equipment. If there's a chance a child is buried here, we do it right." Rachel stared at him. "You're really going to dig? Based on what a 5-year-old says a dog told him?" "In 23 years of police work," Reynolds replied evenly, "I've learned not to ignore any lead, especially one backed by physical evidence." Parker's radio crackled as he stepped away to call for assistance. A few moments later he turned back. "Detective," he said, "I think I know what this is. Do you remember the Mullen case? 3 years ago?" Reynolds' eyes sharpened. "Of course. Andrea and James Mullen. Their 6-month-old daughter disappeared during a picnic. No trace." "They claimed a stranger took her," Parker said. "James said a wild dog attacked him, but the story didn't hold up." "That's not the baby Max is looking for," Noah interrupted. "She's been here longer." Everyone turned to him. Reynolds crouched again. "How much longer, Noah?" The boy placed a hand on Max's head, as if checking. Then he looked up. "Many years. Max was just a puppy. He lived in a yellow house by the big road. One day he followed a man who took a baby from her yard." Dr. Barnes's voice cracked. "That's another case." Reynolds stood slowly, mind racing. "Parker, how old is this dog?" 11 or 12, maybe. Still healthy. But yeah, he's seen a lot of years." "Pull every missing child report within 50 miles going back 15 years, Reynolds said. "Focus on infants under 1 year." As the adults began planning, Noah wandered to the edge of the depression. Without warning, he dropped to his knees and began to dig. Max joined him instantly, powerful paws flinging dirt in all directions. "Noah!" Rachel cried. "Stop!" But it was too late. Noah held something up in his small, muddy hands. A tiny sock, once pink, now brown with age, a ruffled edge barely clinging to the fabric. "This was hers," he said solemnly. The forest stood still. "She's down there," he whispered. "Max can smell her. She's been waiting a long time." and for the first time in over a decade, someone had finally heard her. Back at the station, word of the sock and the depression in the forest spread quickly through the Pine Creek Police Department. Detective Reynolds stood hunched over his desk, flipping through a file marked Emerson Laura, missing. A 9-month-old baby girl disappeared from her stroller in the front yard while her mother went inside to answer a phone call. The stroller and child both vanished, until now. He stared at the case photo of Laura, soft wisps of blonde hair, wide brown eyes and a pink ruffled sock on one foot, the same kind of sock Noah had just unearthed. The weight of the moment sat heavy on his shoulders. If the boy was right, if Max was right, then this was no longer a cold case. It was awakening. An officer knocked at the door. "Detective, Mrs. Mullen is here." Reynolds looked up, his focus sharpening. "Andrea Mullen?" "She's at the Hayes residence. She showed up asking about the stroller." Reynolds grabbed his coat. "I'm on my way." Meanwhile, at the Hayes home, Rachel had just opened the front door to find a woman standing in the rain, her auburn hair streaked with grey, her eyes rimmed red with hope and exhaustion. "Mrs. Hayes," she said, voice shaking. "I'm Andrea Mullen. I think your son found my daughter's stroller." Rachel hesitated, remembering Reynolds' instructions not to speak to anyone about the case. But something in Andrea's expression, the desperate, fragile flicker of hope, overrode caution. "Please, come in," Rachel said softly. Inside, Noah was on the living room floor, quietly arranging his building blocks in a careful circle. Max lay beside him, head resting on his paws, alert. The room was warm and calm, but the tension hovered just beneath the surface. Andrea sat on the edge of the couch, back straight, hands twisting in her lap. "The police didn't tell me much," she said, "but when I heard a stroller had been found near Hollow Creek, I knew. I just knew. It was Lily's." Rachel nodded. "They confirmed it?" "Yes," Andrea said, her voice cracking. "It was custom-made, engraved handle. James, my ex, picked it out before she was born. I've been looking for her for 3 years. She blinked back tears. They always suspected James, but there was never enough proof. Noah looked up suddenly, his blocks now arranged to resemble a ring of trees. "It wasn't a wild dog," he said quietly. "It was Max, and there was no stranger, just the bad man." Andrea's head snapped toward him. "What did you say, sweetheart?" "Noah, honey," Rachel began, but her son continued. "Max bit the bad man because he was hurting the baby. The man kicked Max really hard and threw the baby. Then he took the stroller and ran away." Andrea stared, her face ashen. How could you possibly know that?" She turned to Rachel, trembling. "James came home that day with a bite on his arm. He said it was a wild dog, but it wasn't ragged. It was clean, like a domestic dog." Her voice dropped. "And his leg was bruised. He said he fell running away, but he lied." Noah sat still, watching her with that eerie calm. "Max knows. He's been trying to tell people for a long time." Andrea's breathing hitched. "James always claimed the stroller was taken too. The police thought that was odd. Why would a kidnapper bother with the stroller? It never turned up until now." Rachel opened her mouth, but Noah spoke again. "The bad man kept it in his secret place. Max found it and brought it to the road so people would know, so they'd look for the babies." "Babies?" Andrea whispered. "What do you mean, babies?" Before Noah could answer, a knock came at the door. Rachel stood, grateful for the interruption. She opened it to find Detective Reynolds on the porch, rain still dripping from his coat. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, "I need to speak with Noah again. We found something at the clearing." His voice trailed off when he saw Andrea standing in the hallway. "Mrs. Mullen," he said, surprised, "what are you doing here?" "Is it true?" she demanded. "Did you find something connected to Lily?" Reynolds hesitated, then nodded slowly. "We found evidence that may relate to her case, and potentially to another older case as well. That's why I need to speak to Noah." Noah stepped into the hallway. The pink sock and the blanket piece with the L, those belonged to the baby in the ground, not Lily. Andrea gasped softly. Reynolds turned to the boy. "Noah, we used ground-penetrating radar at the site. There's an anomaly, something buried about 4 feet down. We're preparing to excavate." He knelt. "How sure are you about what's down there?" Noah looked at him with those unnaturally calm eyes. "She's been there a long time. Max remembers. He tried to tell people for years, but no one could hear him." Reynolds nodded solemnly. We've been reviewing old cases. There's one from 12 years ago. A baby girl, Laura Emerson, disappeared from her stroller in her front yard. The stroller vanished too. Noah blinked slowly. Laura? That's her name. The sock and the blanket piece both have L on them. Andrea slumped into a nearby chair. You're saying the same person who took my Lily took this Laura too? We don't know that yet, Reynolds said cautiously. We're still gathering evidence. But Noah wasn't finished. The bad man took both babies to the same place, but Max stopped him from hurting Lily like he hurt Laura. He bit the bad man and made him drop her. A terrible silence settled over the room. Reynolds' tone softened. This bad man, Noah? You've never seen him, right? Only what Max showed you? Noah nodded. But I know what he looks like now. Max remembers. He pointed to his own neck. He has a mark here, like a smudge, and yellow hair. And he smells like that stuff Dad puts on the car to make it shiny. Car wax, Reynolds said sharply, exchanging a glance with Andrea. She went still. James works at a body shop, she whispered. He always smelled like car polish when he came home. Reynolds stood, now fully alert. Mrs. Hayes, I'd like to take Noah to the station again, with your permission. We have a sketch artist I'd like him to work with. Rachel hesitated, but Noah said, It's okay, Mom. Max wants me to help. Andrea looked at her, pleading silently. Rachel finally nodded. All right, but I'm coming too, and Max goes with us. Reynolds nodded. Of course. As they gathered their coats and prepared to leave, Noah tugged on Andrea's sleeve. Max says he tried really hard to save Lily, he whispered. He didn't want her to disappear like Laura. Andrea knelt, eyes full of tears. And you understood him, she whispered. Noah nodded solemnly. Max says sometimes kids can hear things grown-ups can't, because we still remember how to listen. And with that, the boy, the dog, and a dozen shattered pieces of truth moved one step closer to the whole terrible picture. Lake Sutter sat quiet and brooding beneath a pale, overcast sky, its still waters mirroring the thick trees surrounding it. The road leading there twisted through forested hills, hidden from the town's view, isolated, forgotten. It was the kind of place people drove past without noticing, which made it the perfect place to hide something terrible. Detective Reynolds's car led the convoy, followed closely by two unmarked units. In the front seat beside him, Officer Parker reviewed the address they'd just confirmed. In the back, Richard Calloway sat rigid, his face pale, staring out the window without speaking. Behind them, David and Rachel Hayes flanked their son in silence. Noah sat between them, legs swinging, Max pressed closely against his feet. The German shepherd was alert, tense, ears forward. He hadn't taken his eyes off the trees since they entered the forest road. It's just up ahead, Reynolds said over the radio. Quarter mile. Then we stop and go in quiet. The convoy halted just beyond the final bend, where tall pines shielded the cabin from view. The officers exited silently, weapons drawn, communicating only in hand signals. Reynolds approached the Hayes' vehicle. We've confirmed 2 vehicles on the property, Tim Weaver's pickup and a sedan registered to James Mullen. We'll clear the perimeter first. You stay here until we give the all clear. Rachel nodded tightly. David kept his hand on Noah's shoulder. The boy's face was calm, but his fingers curled anxiously in his lap. She's there, Noah said suddenly. Lily's inside. She's scared, but she's alive. Rachel's heart clenched. Reynolds gave one final nod before disappearing into the trees with his team. They waited. Minutes ticked by like hours. From their vantage point, the Hayes could barely make out movement between the branches, glimpses of shadows shifting, flashes of yellow as officers circled. Max began to whine softly, pacing inside the car, scratching lightly at the door. Max needs to go with them, Noah said quietly. He knows where to look. Noah, Rachel whispered, we have to wait here. But Max doesn't, the boy insisted. He can help. He smells her. David and Rachel exchanged a glance. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then David reached over and unlatched the door. Max, go, he said. The German shepherd slipped out like a shadow, disappearing into the trees in the direction of the cabin. Be careful, Noah whispered. Then it came. A burst of motion. A door crashing open. Shouts. A scuffle. A scream. And then another scream. High-pitched, small, a child's. Lily, Noah said under his breath. They found her. What happened next would be pieced together from officers' reports, body camera footage, and later from the items recovered inside the house. But one thing was indisputable. Max had led them straight to her. Inside the cabin, Weaver and Mullen had been preparing to flee. Forged passports sat on the kitchen table, a packed bag by the door. When the police breached the cabin, Weaver had attempted to escape through the back window. He didn't get far. Max, charging through the underbrush, launched himself at the man who had kicked him all those years ago. The German Shepherd's jaws locked onto Weaver's leg with stunning precision, dragging him to the ground before the man could even clear the porch. Officers were on him seconds later. But Max wasn't done. Once Weaver was secured, the dog sprinted back into the cabin, barking wildly, clawing at the rug in the center of the floor. Officers peeled it back to find a trapdoor, concealed, unmarked. The hinges groaned as it opened. A hidden room lay beneath. The air was stale. The space small. Inside they found Lily Mullen, pale, thin, eyes wide, but alive. Wrapped in a dusty blanket, she blinked at the officers as they flooded the room with light. Beside her were shelves, lined with objects that would later make even the most seasoned investigators go still. Baby clothes, small shoes, toys, blankets with names embroidered. And in one corner, folded neatly, was a pink blanket with the name Laura stitched in fading thread. Outside in the Hayes vehicle, Noah sat bolt upright. "They're coming," he said. Moments later, an officer emerged from the trees, carrying a small figure wrapped in a blanket. Behind him, Max trotted proudly, tongue lolling, fur matted with dirt and sweat. His eyes, though, were shining. Rachel clapped her hands over her mouth. "Oh, my God," she whispered. The door flew open before the car had even stopped. Noah leapt out and threw his arms around Max's neck. "You did it," he whispered. "You found her." Max licked his face, tail wagging hard despite the pain that still lingered in his old injury. Later, after the ambulance took Lily to the hospital and forensic teams began cataloguing the horror inside the cabin, Reynolds stood over a makeshift evidence table beside the vehicles. "They were planning to run," he said grimly to Parker. "But they wanted one more chance to erase the past." "It was Max," Parker replied. "We wouldn't have found that room without him." Reynolds turned to see Noah approaching, hand resting gently on Max's head. "Thank you," the detective said, his voice quieter than usual. "Both of you." Noah looked up. "There's more. In the ground. Laura, Max still remembers the smell. He never forgot." Reynolds nodded. "We'll keep digging. Carefully." Back in the car, Rachel watched her son stroke Max's fur, their bond unshakable. "Noah," David asked softly, "how did you know all this? How could you possibly know?" Noah turned to him, eyes steady. "I told you. Max told me. I just knew how to listen." As dusk settled over the lake and crime scene tape fluttered in the wind, a mystery 12 years in the making had finally begun to unravel. Not through technology, not through evidence alone, but through a boy, a dog, and the extraordinary silence they learned to understand together. Six months had passed since the storm, since Max had led the officers to the hidden room beneath the cabin at Lake Sutter and brought Lily Mullen home. The Hayes family had settled into a strange new normal, one filled with quiet interviews, hospital visits, and questions no one quite knew how to answer. But in the midst of it all, something remarkable had taken root. On a warm spring afternoon, Noah Hayes sat on the front porch of their house, his math homework spread out beside him. Max dozed in the sun at his feet, his breathing slow and steady, occasionally twitching in his sleep as if chasing something in his dreams. Birds chirped from the trees, and the scent of freshly cut grass drifted on the breeze. Max was officially part of the family now. Richard Calloway had asked them to keep him. "He belongs with Noah," the retired officer had said. "They understand each other in a way I never could." Max had adjusted slowly. The nightmares still came, deep, anguished whimpers in the night, sometimes accompanied by pacing, as though he were searching for something. But each time Noah would wake and go to him, resting a small hand on his back, whispering, "It's okay, she's safe now," and Max would settle. Noah had changed too. His parents noticed the way he sometimes paused mid-sentence, head tilted slightly, listening to something just beyond their reach. When they asked what he heard, he'd say simply, "Max is telling me something," and that had become their truth. "Noah, honey," Rachel called from the doorway. Someone's here to see you." He looked up to see Andrea Mullen walking up the path, holding the hand of a small girl with curly brown hair and wide, curious blue eyes. Lily. She was 6 now. In many ways, still recovering. Her therapy sessions were ongoing, and there were nights when she woke screaming from dreams she couldn't explain. But she was healing, bit by bit, thanks to the unwavering love of her mother and the strange silent comfort of knowing someone had never given up on her. "Hi, Mrs. Mullen," Noah said, standing politely. "Hi, Lily." Lily hung back slightly, half hiding behind her mother's leg, but her eyes were locked on Max. "She's been asking about him," Andrea said, smiling through the emotion in her voice. "Ever since. Since we got back, she wanted to meet him properly." Noah grinned. "He remembers her, from when she was really little." Lily stepped forward tentatively. "Does he really talk to you?" Noah nodded. "Not with words, but with pictures and feelings, like drawing instead of speaking." Lily thought about this. Then she took another step. "What's he saying now?" Noah closed his eyes and placed a hand on Max's back. After a moment, he opened them. "He says he's sorry he couldn't save you sooner. He tried very hard, but it took a long time to find someone who could understand." Tears filled Lily's eyes, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she knelt and placed a hand gently on Max's muzzle. "It's okay," she whispered. "You did save me. You brought Noah to find me." Max's tail thumped softly against the porch, and he licked her hand with quiet affection. Andrea wiped her own tears. "We brought something for Max," she said, reaching into a small backpack. "We made it together." Lily pulled out a hand-woven collar, purple and gold, with a small silver tag that read, "Max, Hero and Guardian Angel." "Purple's my favorite color," Lily explained, as Noah helped her fasten it around Max's neck, "and gold is for brave people." Max sat still during the entire process, his eyes moving between the two children as if he understood the moment was sacred. Just then, a car pulled into the driveway. Noah looked up to see Detective Reynolds stepping out, followed by a woman he didn't recognize. "Detective Reynolds!" he called. "Come meet Lily!" Reynolds smiled, waving, but his expression carried a seriousness that meant something was coming. "This is Dr. Sarah Chen," he said. "She's a researcher from the university. She studies how animals and humans communicate." Dr. Chen, a woman in her 40s with gentle eyes and wire-rimmed glasses, crouched beside Noah. "I've heard some amazing things about you and Max," she said. "Would you be willing to help us with some research?" Noah glanced at his parents, who had stepped onto the porch. "What kind of research?" "I want to understand how animals and humans share information. There are stories throughout history of children with strong bonds to animals, but your connection with Max might help solve crimes, save lives." Noah thought for a moment. "Will it help people and animals?" Dr. Chen smiled. "That's the idea." Rachel stepped forward. "We'd be honored. Noah's already changed so many lives." Reynolds cleared his throat. "Actually, that's part of why we're here. We've had 3 more cases, dogs, even a cat and a horse, acting strange, trying to lead people to evidence. We think other animals are trying to talk too, and we'd like Noah's help." Noah's eyes lit up. "There are others like Max?" Reynolds nodded. "Possibly." "If Max wants to help, I do too," Noah said. At that, Max stood and walked over to Dr. Chen. He sat directly in front of her, looking into her eyes. "What's he doing?" she asked softly. Noah tilted his head. "He's telling you something about your daughter." Dr. Chen's face went pale. "My daughter?" He says she's not lost, but she's been sad. She has a pet rabbit who's been trying to tell her something about your mother, something she hid before she died. Dr. Chen gasped, hand flying to her mouth. "Patches! My daughter's rabbit, and my mother, she used to bury things in the garden, called them time capsules." "She did it the day before she went to the hospital," Noah said. "She wanted your daughter to find it later. It's in the rose garden." Everyone stood silent, overwhelmed. Moments later, Max trotted to a spot in the Hayes yard and began digging. Within seconds, he unearthed a rusted toy car. "That's impossible," David said. "We've lived here 3 years." "It belonged to the boy who lived here before us," Noah said. "He buried it the day before they moved. Max remembers." Dr. Chen knelt slowly, her scientific certainty unraveling. "Would you and Max work with me long term?" "As long as it helps people," Noah said, "and Max wants to." Max walked over, sat beside Noah, and rested his head against the boy's leg. Reynolds smiled. "That's our answer." As the sun began to set, more visitors arrived. Calloway, the Emersons, even a few neighbours. They came not just to thank Noah, but to meet Max, the dog who waited, the dog who remembered. As fireflies danced in the warm evening air, Noah sat beside Max on the porch. "Do you ever wish you were just a normal kid?" David asked quietly. "Sometimes," Noah said, "but mostly I'm glad. Max carried sadness for 12 years. Now he's happy. Lily is safe. Laura's family has answers." He stroked Max's fur. "I think maybe this is what I'm supposed to do, help people understand animals, and help animals be heard." Rachel reached over and took her son's hand. "We're proud of you, so proud." Noah looked out at the yard where Lily and Max played. "Max says the fireflies are celebrating," he whispered. "They're happy the sad story finally has a happy ending." And as they watched the light fade and the stars emerge, it was easy to believe the boy and the dog beside him had helped something miraculous unfold, simply because they'd never stopped listening.